fiction and environmental non-fiction for middle grade readers. He is an active member of the Writers Union of Canada and the editorial director of Biodiversity Journal, which is an international peer-reviewed science journal published by Taylor and Francis in the UK. He is also the executive secretary of Biodiversity Conservancy International, a Canadian-based charity that supports on-the-ground conservation projects, environmental education workshops, and biodiversity research. His recently published book, The Rain Harvesters, is based in the village of Shaktipur, where wells are drying up and crops are failing. Please keep your microphones on mute, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will take it in the end. Over to you, Stephen.
Thanks so much, Gia. It's been great working with you preparing for this session. So happy we have so many participants coming on to learn a bit more about climate change and learn a bit about our book, The Rain Harvester. Some of you may have seen it. It's published by HarperCollins. I'm the co-author, actually, Sylvia Secundar. She was my co-author on this book, and I also illustrated the book, the cover and the black and white illustrations inside. I'll just give you a little bit of history of this. This is the first book in a series that we're doing with HarperCollins, Cello Cello, Let's Save Our Planet. And interesting story about this, Sylvia and I met online years and years ago when she was writing, I think 20 years now, she was writing a young adult novel, and she saw that I was in my studio in India at the time, and she asked for a little help with the names of her characters. She has a strong interest in India, and a lot of her stories are set in India. She was brought up in Uganda. And we started just collaborating. We had a really nice creative time together. And I was the biologist. She was a teacher at the time and a very well-respected writer in children's literature and also in young adult, a little bit older group. And so we wrote some picture book stories, and eventually Scholastic India picked up one of our books called Sonu and the Metal Elephant. It's about how elephants were being used for labor in logging and logging trees. And so our book addressed that issue. It's a fictional book, which I illustrated. But the long and short of that is Sylvia came to India, and we met in New Delhi to sign the contract with Scholastic. And when we did that, we came up with an idea for a children's environmental fiction series. And this book is what we call environmental fiction. The characters are made up, but the science, the environmental issues are very, very real. So we outlined back then in 2005 a series of 6 or 8 books that addressed things like water pollution, air pollution, climate change, soil depletion, pesticides, all of these ideas we had based around these characters that we started to make into real characters, in the sense that we started to see them and feel them, and I started to draw them. So it was 20 years, almost 20 years later, when I addressed this series proposal to HarperCollins, Tina Narang, who I met at a book festival in Delhi. And to our great delight, Tina decided to pick it up and to help us put it into book form. So the first book is The Rain Harvesters. There'll be more coming out around other issues such as deforestation and pesticides and pollution, water pollution and air pollution. So we're just delighted to have this first one come out. Now, the reason we did a series of fictional characters is I've written a lot of books on climate change for North American publishers, American and Canadian. And it's a very serious subject, as you know. It's a big problem around the world. I'm interested in the other life that we share our planet with, animals, plants, and every living form is affected by climate change. So since it is so serious, we thought, and I've written many serious books on this topic, some for older readers and also journal papers and such, but we wanted to make this more attractive to young readers by creating a set of characters. And so through those characters, as you read The Rain Harvesters, you'll see they're very active, like many of our viewers today. They're very interested in environmental issues. And these two young 11-year-old and a 11-year-old girl and a 10-year-old brother, Sunita and Rakesh, they get active in trying to solve the problem in their village, a fictional village called Shaktipur. And the problem there is a drought. And the drought is affecting everybody. Is everybody hearing me okay? Are you hearing me okay, Gia? I'm getting a message.
Yeah, it's okay. I can hear you.
No,
I'm
Stephen, you're audible. All
Yes,
of
sir.
us, you can hear Stephen, right?
Yes, ma'am.
We request you to please unmute. If anyone is facing any issues, please rejoin because it's absolutely fine for all of us, Stephen.
Good, great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, so I was just addressing why we made the characters fictional and how we get into these issues through this family, the cello family. And the children are the main players there. They're the ones that see the problems and try to solve the problems. They get help, sure, from their family, and the whole family gets involved, and they get the whole community involved. And how do we handle the fact that because it the issue, dry areas tend to get drier and wet areas tend to get wetter and have floods. In this particular village, it's a problem with not enough rain. So the crops are failing. They're having trouble with groundwater, and groundwater tables, they lie below the surface. And when you put in a pump and drill deeply into the ground, you access those groundwater tables. And they're like tables in the sense they're like rivers running below the earth, quite far down. And that's where a lot of the water lies. Now, if it's dry long enough, or if you're pulling a lot of water out of those wells, or if some industrial complex is using a lot of water, those water tables start to go down and they're harder to get at. And the well water becomes a rare commodity. It's harder to get to. So this was what was happening in Shaktipur. And the way they addressed it initially is they brought in some of their animal friends. There was an elephant, and Mango the elephant loved to help, and she would go to the water, to the river every day with the children to pick up water that they were then bringing back to water grandma's garden, because the garden was drying up. So that was the way the children got into the rainwater harvesting issue. So later on, and rainwater harvesting, some of you may not have heard of it, but it means collecting rainwater. And India has a long tradition of doing this. If you go back through the history books, you'll see in a lot of the villages, they had these big vats where they would collect water when it rained. Someone's asked me where I'm from Canada. I'm from Ottawa, capital city in Canada. And I have a studio that I rent in the Himalayas. So I'm back and forth from India, and a lot of my work is international. BCI on my name, you'll see Steplion Aitken. BCI stands for Biodiversity Conservancy International. And that's a charity based in Canada. And we work around the world, largely in Canada, but sometimes in Vietnam. We have a project right now. And we want to save species that are out there, living things, whether they be plants or trees or animals or insects, anything that's living. And that's the study of biology. Biology is the study of living organisms. And there's so much diversity around the world, as you know. If you go to Australia, you'll see kangaroos, but you won't see kangaroos anywhere else because they're very particular for that region. You know, you'll see penguins in the Antarctic. You won't see them up in the Arctic. So around our world, we have amazing animals of amazing colors and sizes, and they all are living, and we're all sharing our planet with them. So the climate crisis is not just for us as human beings, but for all life on Earth. And that's why I think I would like to inspire all our listeners to get involved, to get passionate about saving the living forms on Earth. And climate change, the thing about climate change is Sure, someone asked a question earlier on in an email to me, but isn't the climate always changing? Yes, it is. There are long cycles of climate change that go through thousands, some of them go through millions of years. Glacial periods when it's very cold, drought periods when it's very hot. But the thing about the current climate crisis is it is man-made. It's related to us pulling out oil from the ground that has been made from algae and microbes that are down there for millions of years. And somebody figured out that if you burn those, you can get power. So oil companies drill and pull more and more of that oil out. Coal is another product from that same formation, pressing against these living organisms that have passed away. And eventually they store a lot of energy in the form of carbon. And when they're burned, they produce energy. That's how we have been driving our cars. Many of the power plants in India are burning coal. Now, that has been a form of energy since the Industrial Revolution over 150 years ago. That's how we've been getting our power. We turned it into electricity too. That comes from a power plant somewhere. The problem with that is it produces carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide, which has carbon in it, floats up into the atmosphere, and there's a layer around the Earth called the greenhouse gas layer. And in the greenhouse gas layer, the carbon dioxide builds up. Now, there's already some there, and that's what keeps our planet livable. That's what keeps our temperature nice for living in. But now, because so much burning of these oil products, of these you'll hear the term fossil fuels, because they're fossilized because they've been there for millions of years, and burning them is putting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than that greenhouse gas layer can handle. So what happens there? The sun comes down, hits the Earth, bounces off the Earth, goes back up, and if that greenhouse gas layer gets too thick, then that sunlight comes back to Earth. It's creating a little dome around Earth that is thicker than it's supposed to be, and so it's holding in more heat. That's one of the effects of burning fossil fuels. That increased atmospheric temperature, which we've been tracking for years, since the Industrial Revolution, those carbon dioxide emissions have just shot right up. Now, normal climate change periods take place over a long period of time, but this now, from the Industrial Revolution, is taking place very, very quickly. And the problem with change that happens very, very quickly is that animals and plants, and we humans also, don't have enough time to adapt to it. Evolution adapts animals to change, but not in 100 years, not that fast, where they have to move where they live, where they have to change how their bodies are covered in hairs and colors, where what used to be snow is now ground. So many animals are having a lot of trouble because of the changes that are happening through climate change. And we humans are experiencing it also, because not just temperature, climate change creates a lot of other changes. One of them is extreme weather. And we're seeing it around the world. We're seeing hurricanes, we're seeing storms, we're seeing even things we had never seen before, atmospheric rivers where there's so much rain fall out of the sky in such a short period of time that it's flooding entire areas. We're seeing forests that are catching fire more often, although it's a natural cycle for forests to burn every once in a while. The fires are happening more often and they're bigger. That's another product of the climate crisis. And there are many of them. And when you put them all together, like our polar regions, our ice caps melting, water is a big issue. Fresh water is going to be in short supply as we move into the future. So Rain Harvesters attempts to address that issue by bringing out a long tradition that India has, which is called rainwater harvesting. And to build these big tanks may not be practical in your area or in some of the villages now, or certainly in the city, but there are many ways to collect rainwater. You can collect it off of roofs. You can create vats on roofs that when it rains, you store it instead of having it run off into the ground and then it's gone forever. That's one of the ways to collect it. In this book, Sunita and Rakesh figure out that the water coming off their tin roof, which is a sloped roof like this, the water landing there coming off, if they collect it on the edges with piping and bring it down so it lands in a bucket, they've got some of that water to last longer rather than having it go into the dry soil and be gone as soon as the rain stops. So in the process of doing that, they discover that it really helps their family because grandma now can water the garden, that they don't have to go to the river all the time to do that. And because they're, like you, our listeners today, interested in this topic, they start to educate the people around them. They tell their mom and dad about it. They start to help. They start to tell the villagers how they can do it for themselves. And they get groups together coming to be able to learn the techniques of harvesting, what type of buckets work better, which type of piping makes it more durable and lasts longer. All those things they figure out as they go along once they got started on harvesting rainwater. And they also address an issue where, because the land value deteriorates as the productivity of the crops go down, like people can't grow on their land because it's just too dry, then developers start coming in and they want to build houses instead. And the farmland gets eaten up because the farmers can't keep it because they can't pay for their cost of living because they don't have enough food and they can't sell the food because the crop sizes are down. So Sunita and Rakesh run into some of these greedy developers and they have a bit of a battle with them over what they're trying to do. And Sunita's a very brave young girl and she's not afraid for pursuing something she believes in. So she stands up to Mr. Rahitya, who's the developer in this story, and she gets the village to stand up against him too, and they end up driving him out of town, and they end up building rainwater harvesting system that helps the whole village. So that's a spoiler alert. That's how the story goes. But you probably guessed that it ends well anyway, because we want to show people how to do this for themselves and how to get involved. And many people ask, well, you know, these are big projects. How can I make a difference? Just my own, I'm only 10 years old. I'm only 8 years old. Well, you can get involved by helping to educate your family and show them some of these things that are being done. And at school, you can help by gathering friends who are interested in it too. Create an environmental group in your school. It might be the Green Club, or it might be the Climate Club, or it might be an animal study group. But those who are interested, if you get together, one little voice is very quiet. But if you have 5 voices, it makes a lot more noise. If you have 10 voices, it makes more noise again. And you're able to then spread that message to bigger groups. In the story of the rain harvesters, they were so successful that eventually the newspapers came to interview them. Like, how did you do this? So through the newspaper, they became more widely known in the community, and they were able to spread their message to more people through that process. So don't think that you can't do anything. The first thing you can do is learn, why is the climate crisis happening? And what is its effect where you're living? Are you having floods in your area? Are you having more drought in your area? Are the temperatures getting so high that people are being affected, especially elderly people or village people that can't protect themselves from it? What are the impacts of that? And look at the other thing I think we can do is with our families is put pressure also towards changing over to sources of renewable energy. Now, renewable energy are things like solar panels, wind turbines. These are why they're renewable is because sunlight is continual. It's always going to come on Earth. So we're not using up any of the valuable resources of the Earth. We're taking energy, the same energy that goes into growing plants and giving us warmth so our body temperatures can stay in a habitable temperature level. That sunlight is therefore being able to convert it now, and it's getting more and more efficient all the time through solar panels. I'm sure most of our viewers have seen them. And by getting our energy there and storing that in batteries and ways of storing that energy and converting it into electricity, then we're not drawing on those fossil fuels that are deep in the ground. The other thing about fossil fuels is you have to go get them. And that excavates the ground. That creates a lot of environmental damage, not just on land, but in the ocean. The mining for deep sea oil creates a lot of problems for animals that live in the ocean, marine animals, and it affects their environment and their water, affects the sounds that they hear in the water, a very sensitive sound system underneath the oceans that animals are adapted to over millions of years. So making changes there makes a big change for the ecology, the ecosystems, which is where certain together. Right. So a lot of benefits of switching over from those fossil fuel explorations and from those digging rigs in the ocean and mining for coal. Once we get out of that, we're saving a lot of environmental damage, and we're also then putting more money into the renewable process. And I think as young folks listening to this, there's a lot of possibility for the future for those who like engineering and want to move towards finding solutions that can make those panels more efficient, that can develop other forms of renewable energy. Our oceans store a lot of energy. A wave crashing on the beach has energy in it. How can we tap that? How can we pull that energy out? It's coming by itself just from the moon pulling its gravitational field of the Earth. Those tides keep happening so that energy is available too, and it's totally and completely renewable. So the more we focus on it, the more we use it, the more we support those renewable energy sources, the more we'll be able to reduce our carbon footprint, which means how much carbon dioxide we're putting into the atmosphere, and develop sustainable methods of power production that can be used. Many of you may see now electric cars are available. These electric vehicles don't produce carbon, but the power that comes through the electrical lines, now that we have to look at where does that come from? What's the power source? Is it from a coal burning factory, or is it from solar sources that can then be stored in batteries and put into cars? But they don't produce, the cars themselves don't produce the carbon dioxide or the air pollution that a lot of petroleum-powered vehicles and diesel-powered vehicles do. So those are some more big benefits of switching over from fossil fuel production. I mean, just think of it, right? How many thousands and thousands and thousands of years it took for that energy to get compacted through the ground to create all of that carbon stored in the oil itself. How long that took? How can we take it out this fast and not expect a big change in the planet that we're living on? You know, 100 years ago, we thought, we can't affect the planet. The oceans are huge. Doesn't matter what we do. They just absorb everything. The sky it's so big. I can just send up my suit or send up the chemicals from my factory or the cars that are burning, just send it up, it's gone. But now we realize that is not true. First of all, we have 8 billion people on the planet. 8 billion people is a lot of people. So any little change you're making as individuals is going to have an impact on Earth, because the Earth is not infinite. It is a limited space of air, water, Earth. It is limited in its size. So we have to work in harmony with the cycles of the earth, the geological cycles, the ocean currents. We don't even understand all of them yet. As we learn to understand them, we realize some of these feedback mechanisms are huge. And if you tip over a tipping point, you can make a major, major impact on the planet. And that may not be reversible as easily as it was created. So it's a sensitivity. India has a wonderful tradition of ahimsa, or nonviolence, and respect for life is nonviolence. If you're unconscious what you're doing to other forms of life, that is a form of violence. It's a form of acting that will affect other living organisms. And I have a lot of respect for anything that's alive, because anything that's living comes from that source of life itself. So we have to really respect that it's the same life that's in me, that's in the animals. And we as human beings, we have enough intelligence to see what we're doing if people get the information to themselves, to their classrooms, to their families, and to their communities. So that's why I'm passionate about it. That's why I write books like The Rain Harvesters. My co-author, Sylvia, she lives on an island. She lives on an island off the west coast of Canada. And she said she's seen immense changes in that island over the last 30 years that she's been there. The beaches are getting lost as the sea levels rise. That's another product of the climate crisis. More glacial melting going into rising of sea levels. It's impacting that. There's a lot of drought on her island now that was never there before. The temperatures are just getting warmer and warmer. So some of the native species can no longer stay in that area. So invasive species that come in from outside, they have more ability to impact each of the ecosystems there. So those studies of how animals move and how in any place, in any wild area, that ecosystem is a delicate balance between the organisms that have developed and evolved in that area. So those balances, we're still studying as scientists. We still have to learn a lot more about how those messages get sent from one animal, from one species to another. And we as humans have to respect that and watch what we're doing in there, how we're impacting that environment. Our wild areas are getting smaller because 8 billion people, the cities are getting bigger. A lot of things are happening for agricultural development. There's more farms than needed for growing food. You've probably seen the pictures of the Amazon rainforest where they're cutting forests down so they can make agricultural fields out of them so that they can then export some of that food. So those are issues that are coming out. As we cut trees, that means less absorption of that carbon dioxide, because trees and plants absorb carbon dioxide in the process of photosynthesis so that they can grow. Eventually that ends up deep in the ground. That's where the fossil fuels come from. But in the meantime, it's vitally important to respect that process and not add to the carbon dioxide that's in our greenhouse gas layer above the planet. How are we doing for time here? About 5:30.
Yeah, it's 5:30, Stephen. We still have time. We have half an hour. You're on mute, Stephen.
Ah, did I just do that? I guess I did, huh? You heard me up until now, though, huh?
I heard till you said, where are we on time?
Okay, good. I must have just clicked that by mistake. Let me try to put my PowerPoint on here. I'll run through it quickly. It's only 10 slides, but it gives you a bit of a visual relationship to some of the impacts that are happening in climate change.
Yes, please.
So, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the general topic of climate change. First slide, I'm just showing how drought can impact certain areas. Let's see if I can switch that slide now.
Can you put it on the presentation mode?
Yeah, where is that?
Okay, move to the bottom right corner where you see +134. No, so go to the left. There is a monitor icon. Right.
On my right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The other icon. No, not this icon. On the right. Yeah,
All
right.
That one?
No, next to that. Another on the left, the other icon. No, left. Yeah,
That
this
one?
one. Yeah, slideshow.
That's all?
Click on this one.
Must have been the
And now
problem.
you can just move it with the arrow.
Yeah, okay, good, great.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's an example of something like the villagers in Shaktipur were going through. They were having to go deeper and deeper to get their water. And Sunita and Rakesh's grandmother told them, well, we can't get, we can't go and get all the water from the wells or from the pumps to water our garden because people are having difficulty getting enough water to drink and to use for showers and washing in their homes. So that's an issue that comes out of the climate crisis with the areas getting drier and it's getting hotter. Now, in some areas, like up where I am right now in the mountain areas, you won't necessarily get drier temperatures from the climate crisis, but you may get a lot of flooding. And about 6 months ago up in Himachal, in the Mandi district, there was some very, very large floods that happened just due to an outpouring of just too much rain. It just did not stop. Now, I know people who lost their houses that went down the hill because when you have a lot of rain that's not stopping, the soil gets pulled off of the hills. The houses which are perched on those hills don't have enough foundation to hold themselves in place. You'll get things happening like in this image, you'll get entire cities and urban areas that are just flooded with water. It comes right in the streets because the rivers that are nearby, they start swelling, they overflow their banks, and they start impacting where people live. So climate change doesn't mean droughts in every area, but it does mean...
Climate change mean the world?
Yeah, that's very good. The world, does it mean the world will run out of water? No, it doesn't mean necessarily the world will run out of water where you are, but it means that water is going to become more of an issue. It'll become an important point for conflict between countries because those that don't have fresh water are going to be desperate to get it. And it's going to get more expensive to have fresh water. Places like where I'm from Canada, there's a lot of fresh water because there's only 35 million people in Canada, and there's a lot of snow, there's a lot of rivers, there's a lot of lakes. So Canada now is starting to sell some of that natural resource off to other countries, but they're having to be very protective of it too because your own country is going to need it as well. This is an image that shows cities in particular, how the urban temperatures are just rising and becoming, in some places, almost impossible for people to live in. People that are affected are the elderly, those who are not that healthy. They will be highly impacted by rising temperatures. It's already happening in Europe and many parts of the world. Okay, greenhouse gases. So I think I talked about fossil fuels, that oil that's lying in the ground from pressing the algae and the plants together over millions of years and concentrating that energy. So that's where they come from, deep down in the earth. So it takes a lot to go down and get them too, and that's quite damaging. And when they're burned, carbon dioxide gets emitted. You can see some here from power plants. The carbon dioxide doesn't necessarily look like smoke, but it's still there in the air, and it will keep rising until it reaches that area called the greenhouse gases, and it'll sit there in a very fine layer, almost invisible, but it reflects the heat back down. The heat doesn't penetrate through there very easily when it gets too concentrated with carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide levels have gone up just like that over the last 150 years. You can see it on the graphs. an incredible shift since the Industrial Revolution, since we started making energy out of fossil fuels. Okay, so these are all, this over here, you see that there, COO, that's carbon dioxide, 2 oxygens and a carbon. That's the chemistry behind it. And the Industrial Revolution was when we really started producing more of it because of burning petroleum products. Oh. Now today, and this is probably a few years back, 30 billion tons a year of carbon dioxide because of human activity, just because of all the things that we do and how dependent we are on getting energy. So if there's some things you can do, if you have the choice of being driven to school or riding your bike or walking, that makes an impact. In cities, as they push towards more electric vehicles, that will make a big impact. Government can make change very quickly. They can eventually ban the use of petroleum-powered vehicles, especially the government vehicles like buses. Now we're seeing buses come out, electric ones that are run by the government, municipal governments, and that makes a big change in the carbon dioxide emissions. You can see up top there's CO2, that's carbon dioxide. Extreme weather. Now, from my side of the world, from Canada, if you go south in the United States around Texas, Florida, there we're really seeing an increase in the number of tornadoes and hurricanes, bigger. They're creating huge floods in some of the cities that are on the coast. And when you think of it, a lot of our cities got built because in the days when we used to transport things by boat. So if you look at London, New York, a lot of the major ports, Lisbon, they were built on the coast for the purpose of making it easier to put produce onto boats. But now those port cities are very vulnerable because they're built for the current sea level, what was 100 years ago, the sea level, and now that is rising. So you can imagine as it goes up, how those cities have to be redesigned, the coasts have to be protected, and the people are, in many cases, are having to shift as things change. Just going to drink a bit of water. Okay. In my country, in Canada, also forest fires have become a big issue because there's a lot of trees in Canada. And those fires are getting bigger, and they're creating around them what's called a heat dome. And a heat dome holds the heat in, so that's increasing the air temperatures at the same time. And fresh water, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to become more of an issue as less fresh water becomes available for people for drinking and for using. Now in rainwater harvesting, there are also, the Cello family did a very simple rainwater harvesting system, but you can develop those even further and recycle the water that's being used to wash your clothes, to have shower in, and they can be used again by filtering out some of the things that are put into it. So that can make the system even more efficient and allow the water to be recycled to a certain extent within that, therefore saving the fresh water sources in the ground and saving the groundwater and the water tables. So yes, how can you get involved? See over on the left here, we've got there's a wind turbine. There's a big, huge solar panel there. Even a wind turbine on top of that can provide power for motors, for pumps. Solar energy can also be used for those processes. And by thinking that way and encouraging that to take place in your community, you can see on the right holding up those solar panels. Now we see solar panels up here in Himachal. In a lot of the mountains, when I first came here, there were no lights on, but now the government, the state government has put in these solar lights. So at night, there's always a light on in the community on the main roads. So that's a big step. And those who like science, there's a whole field of energy now that's just opening up possibilities of studying it, learning about it, and coming up with your own solutions as you get older and contributing to the change. We're not going to be able to stop the carbon that's already up there, but we can come up with solutions to make the impacts less and also plan for the future when 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road that we make that shift out of fossil fuels towards a sustainable way of getting our energy. Those are things to think about. I'm sure it comes up in some of your schools now. Yes, so we didn't talk too much about the oceans, but that's a very important area. You've all probably heard of coral reefs. I'm writing a book now, just currently in process about color in the animal kingdom, how animals are colored and how they use color. Coral reefs are highly colorful, as you can see in this image, and those colors are used for various things. But as that water warms up, since coral reefs are very close to the surface, most coral reefs, there are deep sea corals too, but the ones that are close to the surface, as that temperature rises in the air, the surface water temperatures also get warmer. And corals are very, very sensitive to water temperature. It's not the hard part of the coral. The coral itself is actually two organisms. There's the calcium in there and the limestone in there, but there's also an algae that lives in the coral and gets energy from that sunlight and passes it to the coral, so the coral stays alive. Now, it's those algae that are affected by the water temperature. And if they die off, the coral reef is going to die off as well. And you may have seen pictures of them. They just turn kind of a gray and they bleach, which means they lose their color, which means they lose the life of the algae in them. And they're a place where there's a lot of fish nurseries for fish and crabs and squid and octopus and crustaceans like starfish. They all reproduce in these coral reef areas, are just so rich in life and in color, and they also for the marine environment, they're really an important feature. So warming waters is a big problem for coral reefs. The other factor in the oceans from all that carbon dioxide is oceans absorb a lot of carbon dioxide. They have for centuries and centuries, but since we started making more of it, they're starting to reach their limit. And when they reach the limit of how much carbon they're absorbing, it turns into something else, and that's an acid. Carbonic acid gets produced. So I won't bore you with the chemistry behind that, but all of that affects life, affects things that have shells in the ocean. So the shells are getting thinner because the ocean is getting full of the carbon dioxide that it absorbs. So it's a big issue for marine life. And they already are having so much trouble because we overfished our oceans so much, especially in North America, where I'm from, just uncontrolled fishing, just overfishing, and taking too many young fish and young marine creatures out of the ocean that they didn't have time to reproduce more. And all of the life is important for the ecosystem, the marine ecosystem. Like everywhere, it's a delicate balance between all the living things. Not the last one? I think it is, huh? No, let's just see. What number is that? I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Stephen, there are questions as well, which we received.
Should we move to that?
Please, I leave it up to you. I mean, if we're finished, we can take the questions. Do you also have some questions which we received earlier? We also have questions. People are raising hands. So, I mean, if you think it's okay, we can take to the questions.
Absolutely. I'll just stop that share there. And absolutely, yes, I want to hear back from our viewers and see what kind of questions you have and hope I can give you some answers.